Today, Arthur Jackson will talk about the advantages of benefit corporations, which can legally benefit society rather than just maximize profit for investors. Arthur Jackson is the immediate past president of the Humanist community. He came to this area in 1969 to experiment with developing a model Humanist chapter, and he's been building Humanist community ever since. Arthur is the author of numerous articles and 2 books, including How to Live the Good Life, a user's guide for modern humans. Please welcome Arthur Jackson.
Good morning. Unmute my. Good morning. Good. Thank you all for making it out today. A pleasure to be talking to you. In case you're not aware, let me remind you, I am not an expert on benefit corporations. I'm doing this only because I believe benefit corporations is a critical idea that will change human society for the better. My original plan for this program was to let the expert Jonathan Montgomery tell you about benefit corporations, and I would just encourage you to hear him and support my thinking to figure out how to share this information, that these are terrific organizations and that they do exist. And to do that by presenting the best information available online. And John Montgomery in this presentation gives the best presentation of benefit corporations that's available. And I'd make a bet with you, if you can find anything better, I will certainly take you out for dinner. Also, there's an article by him published in the Humanist magazine of May, June 2014. I've made copies of that article and they're available if you want to read more and about the same thing in a different way. And I worked with the editor of Humanist magazine, Jennifer Barty, to encourage him to do an article, which he then did, and that's been available. That was a long time ago. Hopefully much has happened in the world of benefit corporations since then, but not nearly as much as I would have hoped. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is to figure out how to make more people aware not only of that there are benefit corporations, and I would venture to say not more than a small percentage of people even know there is such a thing, and more than that, why they're important and what they could accomplish. This morning I woke up around 5 a.m. thinking about my presentation, and I started putting together something I've thought about off and on in a fragmented way, and that is the realization that what benefit corporations do is bring together the missing point in both Adam Smith and Karl Marx's thinking. So in my mind, benefit corporations provide something that neither Adam Smith, who of course wrote about capitalism, and Karl Marx, who wrote about socialism, a different way to organize the finances of a company. And what benefit corporations do is provide a conscience for an organization. And that idea never existed. Certainly it didn't exist when the U.S. Constitution was put together in 1789, and therefore was not part of that Constitution. So it's all been handled by the states in a sort of hit or miss way. And our speaker of today, John Montgomery, will go into that in that history, and it's very interesting. If we think much about socialist organizations, I think we realize the weakness in them traditionally has been a movement towards graft and corruption by the insiders. sort of along the same line of what happens in laissez-faire capitalism. So I'd call that laissez-faire socialism. Because when an organization is stressed, it's usually the most vocal person who takes over and figures out how are we going to survive in this difficult time. And what a benefit corporation does is to provide the guidelines to help the corporation get through that and not lose the vision, oftentimes of its founders, of how can we produce useful things and benefit everybody. But C corporations, that is the regular corporations, do not in fact have that as a goal. So my original plan for the program was to let the expert Jonathan Montgomery tell you about benefit corporations, and I would just encourage you to hear and listen to his support. So I think I'm now ready to let Jonathan speak for himself, and it's he does a fantastic job in 30 minutes. Then we will go to internal discussion, Q&A, your own presentation, whatever you feel you want to share with us. And I hope out of this we might energize some people to see how can we make this wonderful idea more successful. So here's Jonathan Montgomery.
Thank you. So this is an absolutely wonderful idea of benefit corporation.
You're right. Wonderful idea.
The problem is that I am familiar with this idea only because of you. Most people never heard about this. And so I think that maybe the main problem is how to make this idea more commonly known and more popular and more widely accepted.
Amen.
And I have a couple of suggestions. So
Say that again.
I have a couple of suggestions about this.
Two suggestions.
Yeah.
He's going to make two suggestions.
Oh, two?
Yeah.
Fantastic. You came to the right place at the right time.
Okay. So many of us, those who are sitting here, involved with some other networks. So once the video of this event is posted online, I would suggest that everyone shared this link with their networks. Does it make sense?
Of course, yeah, that's what's got to happen. And,
Yeah.
and figuring out how to draw the energy
Yes.
to maintain ourselves. Because when you're battling against a wall of ignorance, it's real easy for your head to run out of bumping.
And for this to work better, my suggestion to you is that if you could put a little very brief summary of this idea at this website for this event, so because many people would not have time maybe to watch the whole video, but they at least would have some idea what is this about. This would help. And my second point is that benefit corporation and there are other ideas like worker co-ops and other ways of improving our system or maybe even transforming our system. We just we don't have enough venues and enough opportunities to talk about these ideas and to discuss these ideas and this is something that we have to think about, because humanist forums, this is a wonderful thing, but this is just too little. So we need to think how we could create some maybe other forums for people who are interested in these issues, and there are people who are interested in these issues, but they just don't have like focal points to talk about this.
Great, and that's what, one thing I hope will come out of this meeting, if anybody is willing to follow along what Michael Abraham has suggested, would meet with me afterwards, and maybe together we can create enough mutuality. The only reason I was able even to get started on promoting this whole idea is because I decided to go to the Humanist Community Social Action Committee and sort of support the whole thing. And I brought this idea up, but I didn't have an idea of what to go with it. And Fran and Jim stepped up and agreed to jab my butt once in a while and see if that would help me. And just from that little tiny bit, I'm now standing before you doing something. And as Kenita said, no idea is too bad. Your ability to promote any idea,
She's,
remind me of what that said.
Arthur, she's gonna be after Bob here, so.
Okay. But the core of it is, instead of thinking you have to be perfect to do something, if it's a good idea, do whatever you can do, and hopefully that'll lead somewhere.
I have a couple of points. First off, that's 4.5 years ago.
Amen, brother, you got.
I haven't noticed that anything has happened.
Well, let me say this about that. Greg Alexander has gone online, say, okay, what is the world of benefit corporations in the world today? One thing, 2 more states now 33 states who have become benefit corporations. Not a great deal, but they're moving. But the number of benefit corporations, somebody he printed out, but by digging in and had to write everything out and plug it in, and he got about 4 pages of benefit corporations. He just got up to C in California. So they are out there, but we don't even know. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I pointed out to you previously, in the last New Yorker, there's a terrific article on a Sackler family. They own what is called Purdue, I think Purdue Pharmaceuticals. They are responsible for these opioids, and they're making billions. But I believe it is a family operation, it is not a corporation. So I don't know how in the world you would get those guys who are despicable to follow this rule.
Good point.
Well, you read the article. These guys are jackasses.
There's a good point to end on.
Okay. One, well, you mentioned that there is a listing somewhere of all of the benefit corporations.
Well, if you go online, if you go online, you find all kinds of stuff. That's why, to my mind, the core thing to do is to put together a plan for developing an alliance of organizations, and promoting benefit corporations would be part of their, let's say, responsibility or something that they could do, so that there would be a way. I thought of a human public citizen as an ideal part of that plan, because public citizen was developed to encourage transparency in corporations.
Okay.
Because what is a corporation doing behind the veil? And public citizen said, if you're a trustworthy organization, you should be letting the world know what you're doing. One of the key things of the seven mentioned about accountability for public benefit corporation is transparency. That's a key part of being a benefit corporation. What's going on is transparent. Now, we get into a lot of other areas we won't get in now, but people say the only way you can make money is through secrecy. We have the pot there, which helps us do the organization sitting idly, and I know since
We got it covered.
okay.
Now, okay, I guess this will be 2 out of 3. So is there any way is there an exchange, like a benefit corporation exchange, like the New York Stock Exchange, or could you put such an exchange together so that people who wanted to invest in benefit corporations would have a vehicle to do that?
I don't think the whole thing has gotten to that point, but to my mind, that's the kind of creativity, because obviously that would be part of the process. How do you encourage a company to become a benefit corporation? And of course, as John laid out so well at the end, when you're thinking in terms of production depends on fear, I could scare the hell out of these workers, so they're going to produce, otherwise they'll just lounge around and take it easy. You have a mental set where you're not encouraged to think in the opposite term. Is we all know when you're working on a team, you're willing to give your life for the team. Human beings are social animals. Although most of us think our lives are precious, or some of us think it's too lousy to go on another day, but we still hang in there. So the point of it is, this is a great idea. Thank you.
And for another thing, are there any benefit corporations outside the United States?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and this is one thing, when John produced his program, it was just sort of the beginning of this whole thing. Since then, I thought you were going to pass the goddamn collection plate around. You said you were going to take care of it.
You got it.
Impeachment, impeach the president. Okay, but let me just say a couple of words on that, because if you go online, there's just too much to master. But Italy in 2015 became the first country to incorporate. You had to be a benefit corporation, which means every corporation in Italy is a benefit corporation. Of course, I'm sure there's ways of getting around it, like families and that kind of stuff. But at any rate, and Australia in 2016 did sort of the same thing. So this stuff is going on in the world, and I don't have the expertise. There are at least 50 countries that have this, but at any rate, things are happening. More things will happen as we get going.
Yeah, what I was wondering was how you convert a company from a C Corp to a benefit corporation. It seems to me this is something that the board of directors would have to agree on, and they're representing people who own stock and they want to maximize their profits. That might be a problem right there.
Yeah, no question, that is a problem. He did address that issue, so that at least in Delaware law, there is a process for doing that. But you're right, it does, and what it boils down to is where your board of directors is at the time. And to my mind, that's why I felt having a group that would let me say, I'll say it the old-fashioned way, apply pressure on an organization to encourage the board of directors to do that. Now, how much you would have to apply I think depends on a lot of things. And obviously part of that is see, many people who set up a corporation, they're not thieves, they're not crooks, they're not people who want to screw everybody and end up with all the money. They're persons who have an idea how to do something and make a lot of money. But they do want to do it out of their social responsibility. That is, in a socially responsible way. It's just like Hewlett and Packard. Hewlett and Packard went down the tube because Hewlett and Packard died and people were left holding the bag. How do we keep this company going when the whole economy shifts? You know, so you focus on a very good point, but that's part of what I was hoping that this benefit corporation support alliance would do, was to help boards of directors make the right choice. You know, an outside pressure. And right now, it's just happening, as far as I know, as people feel the right way and they do it. So, Alice.
Arthur, how is the humanist community of Silicon Valley arranged? Is it a corporation? That's my first question. The second one is, what has happened to Citizens United? Does anyone know? I don't know. And the third one is, John Montgomery mentioned something that was going to happen in Delaware in a couple of months, and that was in 2013. Does anybody know what happened in Delaware?
Well, I'm sure those laws did pass. I'll have to admit, I didn't follow through on that, but I'm pretty well sure that Delaware did.
And they passed it that same year.
Okay,
Good,
great.
good.
The humanist community itself is a nonprofit corporation. And nonprofits are, benefit corporations are for profit corporations. But nonprofit organizations have their own responsibilities and whatever, so.
They assume we're going to be humanistic.
Yeah, well, hopefully the humanist community is. There may be people who wonder once in a while. Sometimes I wonder myself. But anyway, we're all human beings trying to figure out how do you live best in a difficult world.
Hi, I was going to make a comment about something that he said in there. He was talking about John Mackey at Whole Foods. And of course, at that time, Whole Foods was really kind of in the forefront of positive, you know. And now it's owned by Amazon, which is just about the opposite. You know, Amazon is about the most rapacious corporation in America. So it just goes to show you how fast things can change in just the speed of light.
Yeah.
And then I had one more question, because
But could I just respond to that point? I don't know the ins and outs. I mean, I know about this buying Amazon, that kind of thing, but I don't know the process of all that. But my take is that was a guy, now he talked about him as someone who might be interested in changing the corporation to a benefit corporation. It seems to me obviously that didn't happen.
it didn't happen.
Yeah, but that's where it'd be, an expert up here with that kind of knowledge, it would be nice to share, but unfortunately I don't have
Yeah.
it.
And then I just have one question for Greg, because I thought you mentioned that Greg had a listing of benefit corporations. Am I right about that, Greg?
Yes. The key
Could Greg have the mic to talk about that? Because he did, in my mind, an unbelievable amount of work to create just a little tiny dot in the issue.
Okay, the simple thing is look on the internet for benefitcorp.net. And you can get a list of benefit corporations in any state or all of the U.S. In addition, there's a separate thing called B Corp. B Corp is a certification. Benefit corporation is a kind of incorporation, a legal kind of incorporation. The overlap is that a corporation can get B Corp certification, which they have to adhere to many of these principles that are being described for benefit corporations. So one can be both or either. So both are interesting topics to explore on the internet.
Yeah, but I did, when I tried to dig into that, once I got far enough to know B Corps and benefit corporations are in fact different things. And then I tried, okay, how are they different? And that's where you start scratching your head and trying to follow it. So don't expect it to be easy if you try to answer that question.
Okay, Arthur, I worked for HP for a short amount of time, and when I did, a little bit by the way the perception is being presented here, it's not quite exactly accurate. As I remember, they said corporation must make a profit in order to accomplish these goals, and they had these goals underneath it, if that makes any sense. And of course, that's the way they had to operate. But both Bill and David were alive at that time. In the meantime, what's been happening was, over a period of time, in a number of professions, they started teaching ethics courses. My God, even in engineering, to get a degree, you had to learn about ethics. And so people started coming out of school with ethical values put into them. See, that's another way to do it, right? If there was just what would happen in Silicon Valley is if people didn't have the right ethics, people wouldn't go to the company, they'd go somewhere else. Because that's another way to make changes, right? Unfortunately, the second 2009 came around, bam, all that was out the window. So, yeah, they weren't making a profit. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon me? 2008, don't you know? The worst recession we've had in the country's history.
Yeah, it was the worst recession. It wasn't a depression, but, there's a scale of what it takes. It was very close to that. But these are real issues, and the answer isn't easy. But my feeling is that benefit corporations have a better chance of working through this, because if you have a team that cares about each other, well, at any rate, all answers are not provided, and life is an ongoing process. But I really, why do we have global warming? Has anybody wondered about that mystery? We have global warming because we have many corporations that have allowed stockholders, etc., to achieve billions and billions and billions of dollars. And part of how they were able to get there is they have a psychopathic personality, which means they are not interested in other people's feelings, and they can be very narrow focused, and they can achieve magnificent, wonderful things. And some of them even do that in a positive, humane direction, and some do it in the opposite direction. And certainly the Koch brothers, where did the Koch brothers get their money? It was sort of like magic. They go out in the world and find, well, there's oil out there. Oh, can you believe oil? Well, whose oil is it? Well, it's just there. It's been there for 1 million or 2 million or 10 billion years. But we have a process of incorporation in the United States. So you can incorporate, and through the benefits of legislation, you now own the oil field. And better yet, the state will pay you to pump the oil out, because when you pump it out, you don't have as much left. And well, that's may not be totally accurate, but I think that's the core of the issue. And if that would have been a benefit corporation, it wouldn't have produced those effects. At least that's my fantasy.
Hi, this is Chris. At what Social Action Committee, we were trying to identify what are the benefit corporations that we might be interested in either investing in or supporting their products. There's so much that goes on now, social pressure, put something on Facebook or whatever. So that was how we got into this whole discussion about who they are, how we identify them and support them. But as Greg has found out, it's not that easy to just get a list. So I think, we will continue to strive to do that. So hopefully we'll have at least a nice list of, all right, here's some corporations like Patagonia. That's the only one I know. That, if you're gonna buy something, well, they're a benefit corporation. Maybe we should support them.
Yeah, well, just a little more on that. I tried to say it before, I don't, not clear. When Greg went to that website, you couldn't just print out the list. You had to write out the list and then print it out so you could have it in a electronic form. So that's some of the challenges we run into when we're trying to open up this whole domain.